Hello and welcome, I'm Kira Scrivener, and today I'm going to do the mid-year freakout tag. It has been a while since I filmed, you know the whole spiel, but I have really wanted to reflect on what 2025 has looked like. When I started the year, I really wanted to focus on classics. I wanted to allow myself to take a slower reading time and not to focus, and sometimes I can focus too much on audiobooks. I do love audiobooks with like my whole heart and soul. I think the dramatization of it and like the voices and that just really plays into my heart, and I also, as a dyslexic reader, appreciate reading large classics through audio because I'm able to like savor it and listen to it and not be like, this is going to take me years to read. So it has been a good year. I have read only 34 books, which for some is incredible. For me, who normally reads about 130, 140, 150 books, it's a little bit of a low year, but I do think that I tend to read a little bit more over the summer and the fall than I do in the spring, so I am hopeful, but this is the first year that I voluntarily allowed my reading goal to go under 100 and just be at 80. So I'm allowing myself to just like purposely step back a little bit more, relax, to like focus on classics. I wanted to focus on physical reading, the books on my shelves, and I feel like I've done a really good job. I have reread a bunch, I read a lot of classics, and I've also read some like new releases I was really excited for. So I've not done every single goal, but I am feeling very content with the reading that I've done. I wish that I'd done more because I know at times it's just me being distracted and not like taking long time in books. It's just me not reading, which I never like, but here we are, and I want to talk about it through the mid-year freakout tag. This is a very morphed tag because not only is it not even the original mid-year freakout tag, it's also combined with a check-in tag, but it's also morphed throughout the years of me taking it. I've added questions of my own, I've taken out the questions that don't really apply to me. I've just kind of morphed it a little bit more into my own reading tastes, and I think that this is a tag that is so old that the creators are long gone from BookTube, that we should do this more and just allow ourselves to just like fully embrace, okay, how do I check in best? I don't need to use these questions, but I like this guideline and I like these questions, so I'm going to use them. So the first question I am going to talk about is my favorite books of the year, and this has been a good year. I am going into July a little bit for this, but My Friends is just such an incredible book. Fredrik Backman has been a favorite author since about 2021, and he did not disappoint with this one. I cried, I loved it. It tells the story of two sets of friends. One is set now with a girl, Louisa, and her best friend, Fish, and they are in foster care, and we start with her in a gallery and we learn her story. Meanwhile, we also look back 25 years ago at a painting that was painted by a 14-year-old who's growing up in a rough area. Many of his friends are being abused. Some of them are just very poor. He himself just feels very outcast and unloved by his family. And we look at these stories of these boys and one girl and just the way that their friendships come together. I cried, I laughed. I think that he just delivers nuance and emotion and humanness so well. Like I want to be a writer like him one day. Like whenever I read his books, I'm like, how can you fully flesh out these characters from such different backgrounds, all of these places? And I am just in love with the way that he writes and the way that he's able to render these characters so humanly. If you have not picked up a Fredrik Backman book, pick up this book, pick up Beartown, pick up so many different books of his because they are amazing. But because I read across genre, I also want to talk about some of my other favorites from different genres because they're hard to compete. And another one is Everything is Tuberculosis. I have been a big fan of John Green for 8 years, 9 years, somewhere in there, and he has influenced me a lot, much more as a person talking than as an author. But this book and Anthropocene Reviewed are just such incredible books. This one talks about the connections of tuberculosis and how it is a disease of inequality because it has been completely curable for 70 years and yet it continues to kill millions of people. And he interconnects this with a story of Henry and his story of tuberculosis and various other people's. And I feel like I knew almost all of the details of this because I'm a very avid John Green fan who listens to him talk about this for years and years and years. So like I've even heard the first chapters of this read many times on live streams. So I was familiar with much of the content, and yet it was just such an incredible book. And I think it is a book that everyone should read because it changes the way that you look at the world and the way that the stories we are told about the social order and about societies and the way that medicine works. And it really upends a lot of that. And I think it's a really powerful book. And then the last book that I just absolutely loved is The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. This is a book from like 1905. It is incredible. It tells the story of this woman who is 29 years old. She has been through the whole social scene. She is beautiful and everyone loves her, and yet she's unmarried. And we learn kind of the way that she interacts with men and the way she interacts with people. And we not only see her point of view, but everyone's point of view, which is my favorite thing, is an ensemble cast that tells various people's stories. And I think that it does such a good job of telling her story. And it is a tragedy, and it is a very well-known tragedy. But I would find that the tragic parts of it are much more in the story and the flowing and the way that we see these moments throughout. The ending may be in ways tragic, but I feel like the story told is more tragic than the ending. And I just really loved following this character who felt so human and beautiful. And I think that sometimes we miscount classics and the world doesn't think about them as humanly, but this is a story of such a human woman who has a goal and has thoughts, but there's goodness in her that keeps her from being as conniving as she needs to be to succeed in this world. The best sequel that I read this year was Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. This is such an incredible series by Heather Fawcett, who's Canadian, which we love. And this tells a story of Emily Wilde, who is a fairyologist, and she goes around and studies fairies, and she is studious and a little quiet, a little awkward, doesn't love people. And I liked the first book. I love the second book. I adore this book. The more we get into this world, the more we develop a cast of characters around her. She's just such an intelligent character, and I love that we get to see scholars and people who are very book smart as the leads of so many books. And it's whimsical and beautiful, and yeah, there's action and all of those things, but it's mostly just this story of like good-heartedness and humor and love and fairies, and I don't know how to even render it all, but it's a beautiful book. I also wanted to put in here my favorite reread because I reread 8 books, and that is also something that I've just allowed myself to read. I began the year with finishing my reread of Pride and Prejudice, which, you know, can top every list, but the book that I really like fully reread and had like the most encounter with it was a reread, which was a book that I started in October last year and read with my real life book club, and we slowly read North and South, and my goodness, I loved it the first time. I adored it this year. Like, I just think that it's such an incredible book, and books, when you know what's happening, they can just be even better, and I loved it so much. So definitely my favorite reread of the year. The next question I'm going to talk about is, what is the most disappointing book? And this one was truly disappointing. Even though it had some high points, it had some beautiful writing, and yet it was brutal. I almost DNF'd it multiple times. And this is Morning in the Burnt House. And this is a poetry collection from long ago by Margaret Atwood. And Margaret Atwood is well known for many things, not primarily as a poet, but I really like her as a poet. I came to her through Dearly. I've not always loved her novels, but I have previously loved her poetry. In this poetry collection, I don't think I enjoyed a full poem. There's like a few lines that I have written down that I did really like, but generally I almost DNF'd it, and I feel like if I had have DNF'd it, the world would have been okay. Like, I didn't feel like I gained much from reading this book. So it was disappointing as an author that I've enjoyed a lot as a poet before, finding nothing that I truly loved in this collection. What is the book that most surprised you? And this is The Scarlet Pimpernel. This was one of my mashed potatoes, like a book that I had on my TBR for such a long time, I think like 8 or 9 years. And I read it and I knew so much about it, and yet I did not know some of the like primary things that happened in this book, which was so funny. Like, I knew the plot, but I didn't know who the main character was, because I thought the secret alter ego person who's impersonating is the main character, but it's not. It's another woman who is a baddie, and we love her. She's great. I had no idea that the story was told through her point of view. Primarily, there are some scenes that are not told through her point of view. It's also like kind of more pulpy than I imagined it would be. But yes, this is kind of often said to be like one of the first superheroes, one of the first alter egos, and like not superhero, but like someone who inspired what superheroes would become. This book came out in the early 1900s. It's set during the French Revolution. It is, you know, telling the story of this man who is rescuing noblemen from France, but he's an Englishman, and he is hiding his alter ego so that he can do these crimes. And we also follow this wonderful woman who is at the top of society, but she is French, so she also is being blackmailed to find out who this person is. And it is a delightful story. I'm like, I enjoyed it, and then I thought about reading the second one, and I was like, will that ruin it for me, or should I just keep this? I don't know. It's one of those stories where I'm like, it's not that deep, but it was enjoyable, you know? This is definitely a question that I added myself, and it is a book that you were just impressed by because of the writing. And this almost always falls to poetry, and I love poetry. It's one of my favorite things to read. And Above Ground by Clint Smith is just a book that I like adored with my whole heart. I had previously read his book Counting Descent, which is poetry, and also his nonfiction books. But this book was just, it was great. It looked at fatherhood, it looked at identity, it looked at all of these various things. And we would dive from like him writing a beautiful poem about like dancing in a grocery store with his son, and we dive into like, you know, Hurricane Katrina and like the devastation of it. And he is just such a myriad and multi-faceted writer, and if you read his books, I think you will just be blessed by them. So if you have not read this or How the Word is Passed, he has a book coming out about World War II. I'm so excited, and yet he's a poet, and he also teaches Black history on Crash Course, which is where I first found him. Just a great man. Like, I think I just love encountering anything that he writes or talks about. It's just great. The next question is a new question, and it is based on the podcast Books Unbound, which I just adore. And in it, they always talk about mashed potatoes, which are books that you conquer, you know, how you're eating a meal and you leave your favorite thing until last, and then sometimes it gets cold and it's not very good, but sometimes you eat it and it's amazing. So that is the very Coles Notes of what mashed potatoes is. So books you had on your TBR for a long time. Above Ground is definitely on it because I have been anticipating it before it came out, and I think that it's 2 years old, and I definitely meant to read it like the month it came out. And then Scarlet, Pimpernel, I have been meaning to read for like 9 years. So it was really good to get that off my list. Another big one that I conquered was Things Fall Apart. This is a book that I've had on my TBR for years and years and years. I liked it. I didn't love it. It has an interesting thing because the main character is someone who does a lot of violence and isn't the greatest man. And also the writing style is very direct. And I've been told that the second book, No Longer at Ease, which is such a great title, is a little bit more fluid in the way that it tells stories, and it's closer to when the author was writing the story. So I did like it. I liked the themes explored, but it wasn't the most enjoyable reading experience. Like, I didn't find the writing style as interesting as I was hoping it to be, but I'm excited to continue on with the author's work. And then I had 2 mashed potato rereads, which are books that I've been meaning to reread for so many years. And yeah, the first one is definitely A Man Named Ova, because I talked about how much I love Fredrik Backman. This was the first book that I read by him 5-6 years ago, and I disliked it a lot because I misunderstood it. So now that I've read, I think 7 or 8 of his books, and I'm like, I adore him, I should actually reread his first book that I didn't like. And I reread it, and I liked it. I still didn't love it to the degree that I love his other books, but I do really like it. And then I also had read The Death of Ivan Ilyich about 7 or 8 years ago, somewhere in there. I think 2018. So 7 years ago. And I remember reading it. I remember liking it. But also it was so early in my journey, and I read it on audio, and I just feel like I didn't get the full understanding of what was going on. And I reread it, and I definitely did not remember a thing about when I read it before. And it was good. It was really good. Also, I reread An Age of Innocence, which was also like a book that I had read, 6 years ago, and I'd been like wanting to read Edith Wharton, but I hadn't remembered a ton of it from the book. I'd remembered the last scene because it's very evocative, but I didn't remember a lot before, so that was fun to reread. And then right after that, I read The House of Mirth, which was incredible. So I want to just read so much more Edith Wharton, and I'm glad that I finally reread Age of Innocence and continued on with her. And the next question is, do you have a new favorite author? And I do. I have a full collection of a new favorite author. So I read her selected poems back in November, and then my roommate was so amazing as to buy me her collected works. Christmas had passed, and she was like, are there any books that like you asked your family or like anyone to buy you and they didn't buy you and you really wanted? And I was like, yeah, I really wanted to read Serious Concerns. And then I told her about Winnie Cope, and then she was like, hi, I just bought you the whole collected works. And I was like, this is the kindest thing someone has ever done to me. So yeah, it's beautiful. It's lovely. I'm going to talk about it. So she is a 20th century, 21st century poet. She's still alive, but she's like 80 something. And she is wiry, and she's humane, and she's hilarious. I talked a fair bit about her in the last little bit, so there are some other videos going over her work, but she both captures like humor so well, but she also just captures like humanness. There's a line that is probably not the most like evocative line of her writing ever, but she's just like, she's calling this man, this is set in the 80s, so she's calling this man over and over and over again, and she's trying to get him to call back, and like you know, we all understand that like feeling of desperation that we felt in a relationship, but then at the end she like just says, and you're 47 and single, so you have no reason to not call me back. Which is not like the exactly line, but like it's just cutting. And that's probably not the funniest line I could have thought about. I like the Waterloo Bridge poem, which I think is called After Lunch. And then I also I love the one about this girl, and it talks about her name as a little girl, and she was only called it for a little bit, and then she got a nickname, and then she became a sister, and then she became a wife, and then she became a mother, and then she became a widower, and then like she became a nana, and she only returned to her original name back when she was like an elderly lady where no one remembered her anymore, and they like saw her birth certificate. And like it's funny, but it's also like really human. And there's so many of those moments. Like I love her writing. I was in the middle of The River Girl in like February, and then I just haven't finished it, and I'm devastated because I read 2 of her collections early on in January, and I was like, and then I started a 3rd one, and I was like, yes. So I really need to do that. I really need to do that because she is just a really, really good author. Are there any new releases that you haven't read to but you really want to get to? And I've actually done a really, really good job. I'm not very good at reading new releases. Normally they're years after, but like I told you, I read Emily Wilde, and then I read Atmosphere and Great Big Beautiful Life, and I read Bound, and I read Oathbound. So like I've read most of the books that I've been wanting to read, which is incredible. But Leila Mottley has released a new book, When Girls Get Big, and I'm like, it's amazing. She read Nightcrawling, which is up there, and she read it at age 19. Incredible. It is a heavy book about police brutality and about how girls get trafficked and just all of the story. And this is a story about teen pregnancy, and her writing is just both beautiful and visceral and all of those things. She is also a poet, and you can really, really see that. So I'm really excited to read her sophomore novel, and I hope that it's good. I need to mentally prepare for it, but man, I'm excited for it. And then we have the second half of the year. And again, I'm not really trying to focus that much on new releases, but when I looked at my Goodreads, I found Catabasis, which is R.F. Kuang's new book. Do I know much about it? No. Did I look at it briefly so that I could talk about it, and it said there was 2 rival scholars who were going to descend into hell to get their professor? I don't know. I love her writing and I enjoy her work, so I'm excited for that. And then also Wild Reverence. I fell in love with Divine Rivals. It was such a great book, and this is the next Rebecca Ross book coming out, and it is about a young goddess. Sounds fun to me. I love some good fantasy in my life, so I think it's gonna be good. The next one is the one that's always very embarrassing for me, and it is, what book have you started that you need to finish by the end of the year? And I'm a person who begins many books and does not finish them often. And we could go back to many books that I did not finish last year, which I want to read. But the ones that I've started in 2025 that I need to finish begin with The River Girl. I think that I definitely need to read that, and it's going to be amazing. But I like started a mashed potato. Like, I've been so excited for this book for so long, and then I found it like 6 years ago, and it's such a beautiful cover, and now I started it. I went to Portugal. It was amazing. On this beautiful plane, and in Portugal, I began this book. It was amazing. Have I picked it up since? No. But this is Howard's End. Look how pretty it is. It's simple, but it's pretty, and I love the green. And it's starting to be a little frayed because I'm carrying it around but not reading it. But this is an amazing book. I am loving the writing style. I'm writing the story. I have watched the movie, which is when I began to like fall in love with it. I think I watched it in 2018. It has Helena Bonham Carter in it. So epic. And I've also read a bunch of Ian Forster since this. I think I've read 3 or 4 of his books and have not read this in anticipation of wanting to read this book. So I really need to read this because it's going to be amazing. So I think that like if I don't get to it, I'm just like, I want to read it physically because it is so amazing, but I am just going to make myself listen to it on an audiobook if I don't read it, because I can't allow myself to just let this book sit, you know? I need to read it. It is about 2 sisters so far and their very ill brother, and they are going through and just, they're intellectuals who are getting messy. I don't even know how to describe this book. It's mostly vibes so far. And another book that I have also been mashed potatoing hard because I wanted to read it perfectly. It came out in November. It is by a friend of mine, Ruth Marie Patterson. I have an old interview with her where we talk about writing, and we went to college together, and we talk about her experience of writing her first book, which is Gently Planted, which I adore, and then the release of this book. And then, yeah, it is a good book. I was enjoying it. We went on a picnic and I started reading it, and then again, I never picked it up again because I want to read it when it's going to be amazing. And this is Sharp Edges, Poems of Beauty, Struggle, and God. And I love the way that she tells stories. And also I think I know her life and I know her stories, so I just feel very planted in her world. But I also think that it's a book that would be enjoyed by many people who enjoy good poetry because it's good poetry. So yes, I definitely want to read this and talk about it more. I also wrote a few poems as I was reading this because her words inspired me to write. And I think that's just a sign of good poetry, is when you read something and you want to render your own thoughts because it has created this curiosity within you. So now that we've gone through the embarrassment of the fact that those are the books that I've started, let's give myself some unrealistic expectations of books that I'm going to finish by the end of the year. Do I ever do this? Who knows? But War and Peace. You know, War and Peace. It's 61 hours on audio. It's a hefty book. We've all had it on the TBR forever. But I'm going to see one of my favorite musicals in August. August 14th, I am seeing The Great Comet in Toronto. This is based on 90 pages of this book because this book is so long. It takes a subplot, which we love subplots within subplots, about Natasha and this story. And it is a musical that is both like lovely but also like a little bit avant-garde in the way that it tells stories. Like it sings the he said morosely, or you know, I said this and was offended so I drew back even further. Like I love it so much. I'm so excited to see it. I'm seeing it with my childhood best friend who we grew up with musicals together. But I really want to read this book because yes, I know the story. I don't need to read the book for context, but I don't know the full story of War and Peace because I've kept myself from, being spoiled. So I think that I should read this, first of all, because I love reading something in correlation with seeing something, but also it's just then I'll have the full context. It will be amazing. So I need to do this. I have a month to read this book. I need to read this book. Next book, Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I love Elizabeth Gaskell. She's amazing. Whenever I hear Katie talk about Elizabeth Gaskell and she talks about this and she talks about the themes and the stories and what a good book it is, I'm like, I really need to read this book. It's been on my TBR for years and years and years. So the hope is that I'm going to do that. The next book is more of a placeholder for all of Edith Wharton, but the book that I want to read most by her is The Custom of the Country. I also want to read Summer this summer because that has been on my TBR for a long time, but I especially want to read The Custom of the Country because I think it's another more tragic book. It has a great title. It's from this era. I think it's going to be amazing. So that's my hope. There's many books that I want to read, but these are the books that I'm hopefully committing to reading in this year. The last question is, do you have any bookish highlights? And this is book related because I love Stratford Theatre. I live near the festival and I go every year because you can get $15 tickets and it's incredible. And this year I have seen all of the Shakespeare so far. I'm going to see Sense and Sensibility. I'm going to see Anne of Green Gables on stage. It's going to be a good year. But so far, my bookish highlight of this year has been seeing A Winter's Tale by Shakespeare. I had no idea what the story was. I did not realize there was a problem play going into it. It was so good. The beginning is it's 3 acts of tragedy, 1 act of farce, and then 1 act of conclusion. It's crazy and there's things going on. Such great acting. Some of the actors that I adore so much. So I'm sentimental because each year most actors do 3 productions and this is my 4th year. Somehow this is my 4th year because 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. How's 2022 4 years ago? I don't understand, but it is. And wow. It was mesmerizing. I was like, this is what Shakespeare is. And it's my first time since All's Well That Ends Well, which is this other problem play, which I went in completely blank and was just wowed so much. So I want everyone in the world to see this play and all my friends who I'm please just see this and you'll understand why I love Shakespeare. So yeah. This is my mid-year freakout tag. I would love to hear what your favorites of the year are, what your worst books of the year were, what your bookish highlights are. I'm pretty happy, so I want to hear the good things, but let me know other books that I should have read this year. I've been like not focusing much on new releases, and my new releases have been all my like fantasy and like romance books because that's what I've been wanting to do. But I do love my literary fiction and stuff, and I know we'll get back to it. So please leave your thoughts, feelings, expressions, and I will talk to you next time.